On this episode of Scammer Stories, in every story, there are several twists and turns. Every person has their own hardships to bear. The woman in this story was scammed twice, once by love and the other by hanging on to hope that she could get her money back. Then one day, federal investigators came calling. Anola Johnson says her life was just normal before the scam.
It was pretty ordinary. I've worked most of my career in some sort of travel industry. I've worked for the airlines. I've worked as an agent. I've worked as kind of an administrator. The most recent job I had before the scam was I had just started with a software company out of San Jose, and I was helping with like events, but we worked more on policy and trying to, keep everybody in line and all of that kind of stuff and help them where they needed assistance. I had started working there in December of 2022.
Things were going great for Anola's career. She actually was sent to the City of Love for a work trip, and that is what eventually led to the downfall.
We actually had a work meeting over in Paris in March of 2023. And so I had just come back from Paris and 2 days later got this connection request from Pedro.
When she returned, she got a message on LinkedIn that said he wanted to connect. Thinking it was work-related, Anola accepted.
When I looked at it, he was very attractive. He looked professional, and I was just back from Paris, and Paris does something to a girl's brain, I think. But I just thought, okay, this guy looks on the up and up, so I connected. And right away, he wanted to chat, and so he wanted to chat. It was all really benign. I just want to see if it's okay to talk to you. Are you married? Once he found out that I wasn't married, he started on more of the get to know you questions.
More personal questions, yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things he says, we can learn from each other. And I'm just kind of going, well, you're in the oil industry. I'm in the travel industry. I don't think those, it's kind of like oil and water, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know what I could learn from you that I would want to know about the oil industry and, but whatever. So it quickly turned from that to how would you like to be friends? And I said, well, that's just fine because people just can't have too many friends, right? So after that, I just thought, well, I don't like to be on LinkedIn all the time. So I suggested that we go to texting from our phones, which of course he readily agreed to that. And, we were texting multiple times a day, every day. It went quite fast from there. Within a couple of weeks, he was telling me that he loved me. And we had planned to meet at the end of April in San Diego. I was going to go down there to his house. And he had been supposedly getting a hold of these companies, the oil companies, trying to get a job. I think he was some sort of freelance engineer. And so, a couple of days before we were supposed to meet, he said that he had gotten this job with the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, which I looked up, and it's a real place. It's a real company. And they needed him immediately. So he was going to have to fly out, 2-3 days before we met.
Anola was disappointed, but at least she didn't make it all the way to the airport and sit there for hours waiting on a man who doesn't exist and will never show like so many others have.
Of course, I was really disappointed. He thought he was only going to be gone like a month. He got on a plane, supposedly, and went to Abu Dhabi.
Pedro sent her the instructions on all of his travels to prove that he'd be gone on business.
One thing that I found curious was the letter for his time over in Abu Dhabi. He would be paid $6 million. And I just kind of went, that much money for a month of work? And I thought, well, I don't know anything about oil companies or how they pay employees. I think some can be paid quite well, but I have no idea. So I just took it at face value and just assumed that he was going to be back and figured that we could get together after that and life would be good. So he goes off to Abu Dhabi, and he had actually mentioned prior to his going to Abu Dhabi that we should get a joint account in a crypto investment company. I was hesitant to do that. I didn't have any free money. I had some money in a retirement account. But when I started thinking about it, I said, wait a minute, should I be seeing red flags here? Because I'm just a little uncertain about this. And I said, I've just heard of people getting to trust somebody else and then they take your money.
So you had heard of romance scams or pig butchering scams before?
I had heard of them, but it was difficult for me to believe that little old me could become a target. I mean, I'm a single mom. I just worked all my life. I have nothing. Don't they go after people with more money than what I have? So I'd heard of it. But in the times before that, he was doing the love bombing. He was so attentive. And I had not been in a relationship for, let's just say, decades, just a couple. So it was nice. And I allowed myself to be taken in by that. And so by the time that he offered to that we should go in on an account together, it did pull me back a little bit. And I just thought, I don't know about this. He came back and said, well, if you think that I'm a scammer and I'm not, he says, what are we doing together then? If you don't trust me, he says that we might as well not have a relationship. He says, I'm doing this for the good of our future. If you think I'm a scammer, then you should just get out now. I think something along those lines. And so, of course, I felt guilty for not trusting him. And I thought about it for a while. And I said, we just, hold off on that until we get to know each other better. And so he kind of backed off. And then after a month or so, when he was in the oil field, he brought it up again. And, I was still hesitant to do it. But one important thing happened while he was over there. And, it was my internet is bad. So could you do me a favor? Could you get into my bank account? And I need to do a wire transfer to this guy in Singapore, his supplier for pipes or whatever he needed for the job. And I said, okay, sure. So he gave me his bank info, the password. And then when I got to it, they would be sending him a code to his phone so he could get into his account. So he would give me the code. I put it in, and so I was in his account. Well, his account showed over $4 million in there. And I thought, wow, I've never seen an account with that much money in it before. So he had me wire $1.4 million to his supplier in Singapore. Walked me through how to do it because I've never done a wire transfer before. And then that worked. So all was well.
So you think that this was all fake websites that he was having you do this through, that just are really well done?
I do now, yes. But at the time, it seemed legit because that's kind of how, you get into your own account is, with a little password that comes on your phone, or at least in some instances it does. But anyway, so yeah, I believed it and I could see the money there. A few days passed and he asked me to do it again. So this time he wanted $108,000 moved to somebody else. And I did that. And then the third time he came to me, had me doing it again. He says, oh, my internet's really bad this time. And so he had to try a couple of times for that password, but the password wasn't coming quickly enough for me to put it in, before it timed out. So we tried it twice. And on the third time, we got locked out. I thought, oh, crap, I've done something wrong. It says your account's frozen. So I sent him a screenshot of that, and he says, well, I'll just get a hold of the bank and have them open the account. He gets a hold of the bank, supposedly. When he gets back to me, he says, well, they're going to make me come in person. Well, of course he can't come in person. He says, this is his first ask. Can you loan me $100,000 until I get back? Well, I've seen that he's got this money in his account. He's groomed me enough to where I'm trusting him at this point. And so I think, well, I'm going to have to, get one of my retirement accounts cashed out to do this. But I agreed to do it. So I got it out of my account. I put it in my bank, and then I wire transferred it to his supplier. And that was just the first of many asks. I had two retirement accounts. One had about 100,000 in it, and the second one, if I cashed it out, it would be just over 100,000. But if I didn't cash it out, it would have been about 180,000. Once I got those done, and he kept asking for more for this and that, and most of it was for supplies. And I thought, well, why isn't the company giving you money for this? And he said, well, they just pay me back. And I thought, well, that's kind of a weird arrangement. But, I kept doing it because I knew he was good for the money. I knew he had money in his account, and he would promise me profusely to pay me back with interest if I would just help him out. So I did that. And then when those accounts got taken, he was saying, I still need more money for this and that. Can you, increase your HELOC and get me money that way? Well, I called the bank, and they allow you to take 80% of your home's value and get that in a loan. So I told him that he needed another 100,000 for something else. So I didn't do it all at once. I had to go back to the bank like 3 times, which was getting arduous by that time and annoying. But every time he needed it immediately, but he had to wait for me to go through the process again. And then he wanted more money. And the only other things that I had were credit cards. And I had one credit card with my bank that you could pay, like $180 and then get cash for the rest. So that was about, I think, $20,000. So of course I maxed that out for him. It was getting pretty dicey, and during all this time, he was like, oh, I'm being delayed for this, I'm being delayed for that. He was always making excuses about why he wasn't coming back. In the end, he was basically looking for coins in the couch, anything that he could find. And one time he said, hey, I've got a friend that he's going to put $20,000 into your American Express credit card, and I want you to go and get me some gift cards. I saw the money go into my account, so I went out and purchased the gift cards. And each time it's like, something just doesn't seem right about this, but you're in it so far now that I really needed him to come home so that he could pay me back all this money.
Yeah, now you're holding on to hope that you're going to get your money back, and that's a strong pull. Now, do you think that you were actually laundering for him now that you look back? Were you money laundering for him?
Not yet.
Okay.
But what happened with the credit card was that whoever put the money in my account, I went and got the gift cards, and then they would pull the money back out. I guess you can pull it out before X amount of days. So this happened like 4 times, and then American Express came to me and said, hey, we're closing down your account. You owe us $25,000 in December, when I had no money left. And I thought, oh my hell, what is he doing? He still was telling me that he was going to be home before Christmas, right? So then, in the meantime as well, to answer that other question about laundering, he found this great deal that he was going to work with somebody from a crypto company. And before he got home, he wanted me to start with this process. They wanted me to sign up for a new bank account, to become an agent for this crypto company. And they were going to get new people to invest in the crypto. So people would send me the money, and then I would change it into crypto and put into their other accounts. So I think that's where the money mule thing started coming in. I went through the first part of that process, but I was dragging my feet on it because I didn't want to do it. And then mid-December, there was a situation where he wanted me to get a present for his son because he wasn't going to be home for Christmas. So the last $5,000 to my name, I went into Apple and bought the top of the line iPad with all the bells and whistles. oh, and while you're at it, do you mind, throwing in an iPhone, the latest iPhone? So that I walked out of there with about $5,000 and then sent that to a place in Houston where I swear he told me that his kid went to school in Dallas, but then I was sending the package to Houston. A week or so after I had sent that, I got a phone call from this voice that I had never heard before. Is this Anola Johnson? And I said, yes. And I just kind of froze because who is this guy calling me and what does he want? How does he know my name? And he said, we just found a package from you that was going to be sent on to Nigeria. Did you mean for your package to be sent to Nigeria? And I said, no, this was supposed to be a Christmas present for my boyfriend's son. He then told me that he was with the Office of Inspector General or something like that. And they had raided this guy's apartment and found a whole bunch of merchandise being sent to Nigeria.
Describe to me what that felt like when you were on the phone with that man.
I couldn't hardly think. I froze. It was kind of like the room started spinning. I had so many thoughts going through my head and nothing going through my head. And I was just dumbfounded. So he says, I don't want you to just assume that I am who I am. As soon as we get done here, I want you to hang up. I want you to Google the office that I work with. I want you to talk to them, ask them if I work for them. Here's my name, my information. Okay, great. And I don't think I would have thought to do that, but I was very appreciative
Yes.
at that point in time because who do you trust at this point,
at
right?
this point. Well, and how did they know to raid that apartment? Did you ever find out?
Yeah, I did, but it's an ongoing case and I can't really talk about it. Soon, this case is supposed to be wrapped up and perhaps they'll find him. I don't know, but I don't dare give you any more information than that. Not because I don't want to, just because.
Oh no, I would never want to hinder an investigation like this. So no.
But that's how I got woke up. And he knows about the computer. He doesn't know about everything else that went on. And so it took me a couple of days to sort out all my thoughts. And after that, I called him back and I just told him everything. We made a plan, but part of that plan was that I had to tell my family. I've got 2 grown sons and I had actually borrowed money from them in this fiasco. I lied to them. I told them it was for something else, totally different. And now I have to come clean, So here I am trying to teach my kids to be fine, upstanding people. And then here I go and lie to them. And I just felt like pawn scum, But my brother, who is my rock, I called him and said, I need to talk to you. This was a week before Christmas. And he wanted to meet me at the Starbucks inside of a Target in my town. And I thought, well, that's not the ideal place.
And at this point, you making demands. You'd be like, okay, I'll do whatever you want. Let's go wherever you want. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I met him there and told him the story. He didn't really want particulars. He said, well, how much do you think you've given this guy? And at that point in time, I thought it was around $700,000. And he nearly fell off his chair. He was just gobsmacked. But he said, well, we've got to tell your boys. And I said, I don't want to tell them this right before Christmas, and he says, too bad, basically. He says, we've got to fix this now. So I went home, told my kids, and I'm just devastated. I can't tell you how low I felt, other than probably about as low as you can get before you start thinking about suicide. I never really thought that I could go through with something like that, but I understand how people feel when they get that low. It was scary. It was a scary place to be.
Next up on the list of family members to talk to was her sister. The two are close in age and have always been tight. Now, keep in mind, this was all happening in one day. Her brother insisted that everything needed to be out in the open right away.
He says, you need to call her. And I said, I can't go through this again. I can't say this 3 times in one day. And I said, will you do it for me? And so Of course, everybody rallied around me,
Now, what did the boys
but
say when you told them? I know that had to be so hard.
oh my gosh, I was just sobbing. What could they really say? It's like, it's okay. We'll get through it. I don't really remember because I was just so devastated. It was like I told them, I went into my room. I'm sure my brother said something to them, and I couldn't even speak for a while after that. It was bad. I've never been in that spot before. It was crazy.
The one thing is, though, that a lot of like people like my mother, once she figured out it was a scam, she still wanted to talk to him. She couldn't stop. But you did?
Well, that was part of the agent's plan, not my plan. He wanted me to keep in touch for a particular reason. So I did. As I think about it more, your mind is so brain jacked by that point in time that you don't come out of it immediately. It's like, you got to let go.
While she was struggling to let go of the relationship, she decided the least she could do was contact the man used in the picture and tell him that his picture was being used. That ended up being a mistake down the road.
And so I reached out to him, and, a few days pass, and then I get this phone call at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was from him. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And so, and I think it was a video call too. And I'm going, hey, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to talk to anybody on video at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so I texted him back, and he said, well, I want to make sure that you are a real person. He called me, and I talked to him for about 20 minutes, and it was the guy's face. So I thought, well, this finally is the real guy. So I did find him. I thought it was so weird. It was like within a couple of days, he was telling me that he loved me. And I thought, I'm in love with him, but he can't say that he's in love with me because he's only known me for a couple of days. I've known him for 9 months, which is just a strange, weird thing to even think.
Okay, so if you're lost, here's what's actually happening. She was scammed by a guy using someone else's picture, and when she went to find the real guy, she actually ended up with another scammer on the other end of the line. What probably happened was the profile she reached out to wasn't the real guy at all, but another account using his picture.
But it went right back into all of the grooming that I had been through before. And I told him the story, right, of the first scammer. And he said, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. Let me try and help you recoup your money. There's this crypto account or this crypto place that you can, earn your money back. Well, by then I had no more money, but it was kind of a fluke thing. My brother set it up so that I could turn my HELOC into a new mortgage payment. And somehow in dealing with all of that, I was being refunded $5,000. So I put this $5,000 in this crypto company. I think it was like 2,500 he wanted me to put in. But at the same time, I was going, are you Pedro? Are you Pedro? I kind of gave him a hard time because it was alarming at the same time to realize that I was being asked to do the same thing. But anyway, long story short, it was pretty much the same scam that the first guy ran on me, with, some different scam options, but, who promised me returns and promised that he would get all my money back and everything. And so I was desperate and hopeful at the same time. So that's kind of why I went through with the second scam. And after about 9 more months, and he was supposed to come home, and he lived in LA. He was home, and then he still wasn't meeting me. And I said, listen, I'm going to LA, and you'd better meet me at the airport. So I went, and he didn't show up. And when I got back, of course, I was pretty pissed and hurt. And I said, why aren't you meeting me? And he said, well, there's something that I've been trying to tell you, but I just, haven't figured out a way to do it. I don't know how. He says, I'm going to call you. I'm going to do a video call. And so when he called me, I saw this black young man on the other line. I thought, what the hell is this? He was from Africa, and he said, I'm sorry that I lied to you. He says, but in the meantime, when we've been talking, I really have fallen in love with you, and, yada, yada, yada. And so again, I was like floored. I was not talking to the man that I thought I was talking to. And I thought, how could I do this again? How could I be so stupid? I remembered what the agent said, keep on the line with him for a while and maybe you can find out some information or something. So I continued to talk to him. The relationship totally changed, however, because he was probably, I don't know, early 30s at the most, I would imagine. I did ask him why he did that to me. And he said, there's no jobs over here. People are desperate. And I understand that. I said, but at the same time, why do they have to take everything from me? I have nothing left.
Where does your life stand now?
Um,
How are you doing?
I'm somehow surviving. Through all of that, my brain was so with this other stuff that my job was not going well. And I actually got fired like a month ago. I know it was because my brain was elsewhere this whole time. I was doing what I thought was an adequate job, but my boss didn't think so. So she, got rid of me. The only things that are keeping me afloat right now are Social Security and unemployment. So I'm kind of in dire straits right now, but I am surviving for now. I don't know what's going to happen in the future.
You can hear how she's suffered one blow after another. And to top it all off, she now has to repay the taxes on her retirement money she withdrew, which has now landed her thousands of dollars in debt. She now has started a podcast, and I'll put that information in the show notes so we can help build her audience and spread the word. Until next time, Scammer Warriors.